more that someone who's really won in the game of entrepreneurism or real estate development or real estate investing can just focus on what they're best at, the more value they're going to create. That's why the family office space exists. The more people hear about it, the more they look around and say, hey, I should have some sort of family office solution in place. You could hire a full-time person just to stop you from making the mistakes. And then they can also help you have less chaos, less stress, be more effective on your use of time, be more powerful for each hour you invest in your investment activities.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, what's the good word?
Eric, it's another day, another week, and let's move forward and do some commercial real estate investing.
Well, we're going to stop the presses here because I think you have to go back in the annals of time to locate the last time I actually congratulated you or gave you a compliment for anything. Can you remember when that might have been? And you're getting old,
I'm really thinking about it.
You're getting old, so the memory doesn't stretch out too far. Anyway. But this is going to be an exception because we're just at an event here the other day, and we have the local community Commercial Realtors Association providing awards to people throughout that they've done throughout the year. But you actually received award for Lifetime Achievement, which is something a little bit higher than just the typical deal award that's provided. It's really for your level of service to the real estate community, and I think it was well deserved. And I had to explain to the people at the table that career achievement awards are typically for after the person's already passed away, but you were still alive. So it was important to point that out.
That kind of bothered me a little bit. I was hoping I still had a little bit of runway, but anyway, thank you. It was great because the mayor came and made the award. And the other thing that bothered me is we held it at the aquarium, and it always bothered me when I'm talking about real estate and it's underwater, but we got through it. And
well, you are still alive. So that's the bright side of it. The career achievement is not for after you've already passed. So no, but in all seriousness, it was to be recognized by your peers as having contributed. I think that has a lot of meaning. And congratulations on that. Switching topics on you, we had a nice email today from a guy named Rick. Rick, we would love for you to go in and give us a review on the Google iTunes Store and the Google Play Store. We definitely like the fact that you sent us an email and tell us how much you like the show. And we read those and certainly appreciate it. You just say, hey guys, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. We like all the Florida topics that you cover. That's great, Rick. And man, we would really love it. Also, if you could go and do that on the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store, and it helps us when we're trying to get guests because they will take a look at who's checking us out, how many downloads we've had. Is it relevant? Because everybody's in this, they're trying to invest their time just like anybody else. They're hoping to get make some good context out of it. So, Rick, we appreciate that. And anybody who's not done so, please go on iTunes Store or the Google Play and give us a review. Steven, we're going to talk. We got a guest that's been on the show before. Give us a little bit of an update. So let's go ahead and, unless you got something to add.
Can't add to that. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get rolling into our guest.
Today we have with us Richard Wilson. Richard is the CEO of the Family Office Club, which is a private club with 1,750 registered investors and around 900 monthly subscribers. They host 25 events a year. Richard has written the #1 best-selling book on family offices and capital raising, and he advises $100 million plus net worth families through his Centimillionaire Advisors LLC firm. Richard is a returning guest, and he's going to update us on the family office market. Richard, welcome to the Invest Florida show.
Yes, thank you for having me here. Appreciate it.
Richard, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us again. Why don't we pick up where we left off last time? Obviously, it's been 3 years since the last time we had you on the show. What's been some significant changes? What's going on in the family office market? And maybe we should even start first for folks that haven't listened to the show. It's obviously been a while. Why don't you just give us a brief overview of what a family office is?
And maybe just a little bit of the statistics.
Sure. Yeah, so a family office solution is it's a wealth solution for the ultra wealthy. So a shortcut of thinking about it is you have far different problems, more complex problems, and more severe consequences if you don't watch the details if you're worth $200 million versus $200,000. Everyone kind of instantly can see that may be the case. Maybe you have 40 different LLCs and 25 different K1s coming in, et cetera, if you are worth 50 million, 100 million plus. Whereas you might have just a W-2 slip or 2 LLCs and a single business tax return to file if you're worth a couple $100,000 or a couple million. So that's why the family office industry exists. The mistakes are very expensive, and you can easily just make a $400,000 mistake. I've made a few $100,000 mistakes myself, and I'm not worth 100 million plus. And I think that you could hire a full-time person just to stop you from making the mistakes. And then they can also help you have less chaos, less stress, be more effective on your use of time, be more powerful for each hour you invest in your investment activities or your operating business. And the more that someone who's really won in the game of entrepreneurism or real estate development or real estate investing can just focus on what they're best at, the more value they're going to create. So that's why the family office space exists. The more people hear about it, the more they look around and say, hey, I should have some sort of family office solution in place. And that's part of the mission of the Family Office Club, just to spread the word, which is why I like doing a lot of these podcast interviews. Statistics-wise, there's well over 10,000 formalized family offices globally, probably coming up on 15,000. And WealthX and Bloomberg and Financial Times put the number of people worth over $30 million globally, which is generally referred to as the ultra wealthy, at 211,000 was the most recent number from WealthX that I saw. And then the number of people worth over $100 million, which are called centimillionaires, is 55,000. And then the number of identified billionaires is right around 3,000, depending on who you look at statistics from. But interestingly enough, most of the general public has never heard of the word family office. Most ultra wealthy have never heard of the word. Yet now, at least most people that work in the investment industry have. And when I got started 12 years ago, almost no one in the investment industry had heard of it. So things are changing. It feels like slow motion change sometimes, but the industry is really thriving and growing.
So let's talk a little bit about what changes you've seen maybe happening in the last few years. Has been any significant changes or updates in family office that you've seen?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Just in the last 5 years, there's been a real move to independent sponsors strongly over going through funds, especially as you're just growing a relationship. It used to be that just the small, nimble startups were offering independent sponsor, direct-to-deal format. And then medium-sized firms started offering co-investment rights. And then the large firms are kind of forced to because their institutional clients were asking for it. And now there are some big institutional firms that will even let you co-invest without investing in the fund first. But still, most of them require you to invest in the fund first at the largest scale. But that's totally different than 7 or 10 years ago when the common thing was to go through a fund manager. A decade ago, the term direct investments wasn't commonly known, and it would make up maybe 10 or 20% of the conversation at a family office event. We've hosted 113 conferences and workshops through the Family Office Club, and now at our events, it's probably 50 to 60% of the conversation going on. And there's just a lot of activity around figuring out how to build a direct investment portfolio, how to manage risk, should you be focused or diversified, and how to put together a family office solution that makes sense for direct investments. Because with both of those changes I just talked about, there's the challenge that most wealth management firms, private banks, trust companies, and even multifamily offices fail to really serve families in the area of direct investments. And I'm happy to talk about any of those things a little bit further, or on that last point a little bit more, or we can just move on to your next questions if you'd like, either way.
Well, I would like to know about the direct investments, because that's going to appeal to a number of our listeners who are syndicators and sponsors.
Yeah, and raise capital to do this. What kind of deals are your family offices working on? Can you give us an example of some things you may be working on now?
Sure. One of my clients sold his business for $1 billion a little bit over a year ago.
By the way, I just want to point out, any friend of yours is a friend of mine.
Great. He just had an exit and in the fintech space, and the sub niche that he's in is a space where he wants to do more investments, but he's also interested in any type of fintech investment that has a lot of IP, and the valuation isn't too high on it already. But I think this is like a commonality between the wisest of clients I work with, is that they want to invest in things they can understand, which are somewhat related or parallel to where their wealth is created, but they really would love to see more deals just like the area they're in, or very parallel. So I've got 3 clients right now we're onboarding. In all 3 cases, they're looking for things that are in their sandbox that they're already in, which is great. It's great that they have that ideal. They're shooting for that. They wish they had more deal flow in that. The problem and the money getting burned is when they get pitched on deals that have nothing to do with the space they created their wealth in, but they're not fully occupied with amazing deal flow that's highly curated for them. So they do invest in that mobile startup or that cannabis, startup or that other thing, which, could be exciting or could have a great sounding and feeling entrepreneur behind it, but it's not the space that they really know. So a lot of families fall in that trap. Even if they know what their focus should be, they don't know how to fill their deal flow funnel to actually act on that and have great, consistent, excellent deals available that meet all the criteria that they should be identifying for themselves.
Sure.
And this comes back to yeah, go ahead.
It makes sense. So how does that apply in the sandbox? How does that apply in the real estate sandbox?
Sure.
Do you find
really good question.
any direction there that people are going in?
Yeah, so if a family made their money in real estate, many times they're just so bullish on it, they'll have 50 to 80, 90% of their wealth in real estate. Whether or not 80 or 90% in real estate is a smart idea or not, a lot of them are just very bullish on it. And to win them over, your idea better be very compelling and unique, because they usually have a pretty good handle on things themselves and don't need to rely upon a ton of fund managers and sponsors in their own niche. But if it's a half step away from where they are geographically or strategy wise, they might still work with someone because they might understand what you're doing very quickly. If it's not a real estate family and they made their money in manufacturing, then I've learned there's some shortcuts, and the shortcuts come from 3 different trust curves people have to move up before they're going to say yes to a deal. And it is the trust curve of the team, or you as a principal of the firm if you're raising capital, the trust curve of the industry overall and being comfortable with it, and the trust curve of the deal at hand. And so if you're talking to a family that made their money in manufacturing, like one of the clients I'm onboarding now, or in fintech, and you want to show them a self-storage deal, okay, well, luckily you're in the self-storage space. You're not in mobile home parks or data centers or warehouses. So likely someone can figure out how self-storage works, even if they themselves haven't used self-storage. Probably one of their family members has. And likewise, multifamily, right? They're very easy to understand industries. So that second trust curve can be navigated pretty quickly, and you just have to get them familiar to the deal. If the family is local to the deal, that also helps. And then obviously if they've known you for a decade or 5 years, your team just blows them away, then that really helps. But if you go into meetings and it's a manufacturing family in Toronto, but the deal is based in Dallas and it's a data center deal and you have no connection, no referral into this family, they don't know you at all, and your team is good, you think you've got a great strategy, but you're not going to blow them away with your team instantly. You just probably shouldn't even go into that meeting, and they probably shouldn't be taking the meeting with you. You really need to be up one of those curves. And every time you go into a meeting, figure out what's the goal of this meeting. Do they already love us and it's all about getting them comfortable with RV parks? or is it, some other trust curve that should be front and center to really move that non-real estate family towards saying yes to this deal?
Well, and this was going to be the question next question I was going to ask. I know it's a challenging question because each specific case it stands on its own. But if somebody is a single family home investor and he's doing she's doing her first syndication deal, and it's a 100,000 square foot Publix retail strip center, that's probably not going to be a good fit for these experienced family office investors. But maybe there's something in between that we can talk about. Like, where do you see experience level in terms of level of importance? What kinds of deals do you think that they would have that some syndicator would have a crack at doing? Do they want to see 10 years of experience, or is it, if they did a couple of deals that were successful, that would be enough to get the foot in the door? I know it's going to be each individual is going to be a different case, but maybe you can speak in some generalities for us.
Yeah, sure. So I think that trust is the first and second most important thing, and just having high conviction and de-risking the investment based on your offer being really compelling. And if you are going to someone and you don't respect their time enough to know yourself, your competitors, the marketplace, and have done some research on the investor so that you can narrow down why you matter on planet Earth and get that down to a single one-line or a single sentence, then you should just not even be reaching out to people. It's just a form of laziness to write them essay-long emails and just being long-winded and not clear and not even be aware that all of your competitors say the exact same thing, et cetera. That annoys families to no end, and they just instantly archive your email, and you get punished for not, realizing that everyone's saying that, and they see tons of pitches, right? So first of all, you have to be unique and be playing a unique game and define a unique sandbox that you want to be playing in, or a unique keyword term. So you can imagine that if all you're doing is multifamily investing only in Tampa, and while it's not technically senior living, you're catering to pre-independent living, pre-senior living type demographics. So you have aqua aerobics, you've got a certified nurse on call who actually lives within the community, but she also works as a nurse that can go to the places. You can have delivery of groceries for people who have a hard time getting out and getting in their cars and go into Publix, et cetera. And the whole community is catered to the 55 and up or the 60 and up community, et cetera. Then that's a niche, because most people say, oh, okay, well, I didn't know there was someone that only invests in multifamily, only in Tampa, only for pre-senior living. It's a niche within a niche within a niche, versus someone who says, oh yeah, I do multifamily and we're in New York, the state of Florida, and Texas. It's like, okay, great. Well, there's 400 other people doing that. And by the way, some of them have more focus and larger teams and longer track records. So you're kind of dead in the water unless you have a big advantage in some other way. So I think that's pretty important to have a distinct, unique approach to what you're doing. And I think that families are always looking for high integrity and high integration of things being very aligned. So even if you don't have a real in-depth track record, you could start small with someone, and with a unique value add strategy, they might start really small, test you out, see how you treat them, see how you perform, and then grow with you and your firm, even if it is small to begin with. And so there was a group at our, I think it was at our Chicago Family Office Club event recently, and it was an oil and gas guy. And I love this story because he said, I went out and tried to raise a $100 million deal for my first deal, and it didn't happen, and it was very frustrating. So then I went out and I found a 110,000 oil well deal that I could raise capital for. I put up $55K. I syndicated the other $55K across 6 investors. It was crazy, embarrassingly small, but we got the deal done, and people knew I believed in it. And then we did the next deal, and it was $400K. And then we did the next deal, it was $800K, and it returned to $3 million to the investors. After that, they raised $5 million, and now he's raising, he just lately finished a $30 million raise. And so I like those types of stories, because a lot of people come out of like not doing anything, and then they come to me saying they're going to buy the Marlins, or they're going to get a $1 billion deal done.
Right.
And it's like, no, you're probably not. You're just wasting everyone's time, including your own. And, you should just hit singles before you try to go for home runs, right? And it just builds a credibility naturally, and it shows that you're long-term dedicated and you're long-term greedy, just to structure things lean, get momentum, show progress. And I know it's like a long-winded answer, but those are some of the most like pertinent, like most specific
No,
things
but that's
I could say to
important
that.
because people are saying, is this me? And we see it all the time. I'm sure you do too. And syndicators or people wanting to get into syndication are doing, they're in beginning levels of syndication, don't understand their box. And they try to, everybody told them, hey, just think big. Well, think big will close doors for you, on a lot of these types of things. It's the same thing, when you're calling and property owners and talking to them about a particular tenant. It's like, well, there's the tenants in the plaza. Did you not even do the research? Click. You got to know your box and understand it. Or not only are you wasting other people's time, but you're basically cutting your nose off to spite your face. So I think it's good, sound advice. Even though I know that was a long answer, I think it was pertinent and important for people to hear.
Well, let me ask you a question, because for our some of our real estate listeners, who want to go out and syndicate, one of the issues is always timing. It's real hard. You tie up a property and you've only got a small amount of time to really get people behind you, or you're out of your due diligence period, and so how fast and from what you said, one of the three terms was it's the deal specific. So I'm extrapolating that it's not really blind funds. It's really, you have to go with them with a deal. What's the timing? How long do they take to react? How can investors get to them quickly?
Sure. I mean, I think you need to build relationships and plant seeds. The good news is you could have just 2 to 4 strategic family office relationships, and it could be just as powerful as having 50 or 100 private investors. So it should be worth it in your mind to plant those seeds, even if it takes a few deals of them watching, a deal or two of testing you out. You have to be developing those for the long term. It's not like today you hear about family offices for the first time, and now by knowing they exist, you're going to be able to get them into your deal that closes 10 days from now. There have been times where in New York, somebody presented on stage at one of our family office club events, and then an investor heard it in the audience, texted their principal, and the principal turned his private jet around and came back from Philadelphia to New York and met that same day with someone who had a direct investment deal that was very time sensitive. That's pretty rare. Usually families are looking at lots of deals. They have professional staff to review things, screen things. You have to make it through one layer, just like institutional capital. No one's writing you a $50 million check, in the next 15 days that doesn't already, have you under due diligence for a couple months. So I think that it's good to just plan on it taking 4 to 9 months. Sometimes it might take 18 months to 3 years to win over a ultra wealthy individual. But the most common time frame I see is 3.5 to maybe 5.5 months, and we're seeing that with the 3 families that we're onboarding right now to our Centimillionaire Advisors division. Is that's about the time length in mind. And the only way to speed it up is more FaceTime, more video FaceTime on your phone, and getting them educated faster and more comfortable with what you're doing by being really transparent, bringing them to the asset itself, and being flexible on the terms, and just wearing on the sleeve that if there's extra risk, then you should structure things more as a co-GP or JV equity, or do a performance fee only. Or there's some people raising a lot of capital by doing a little equity bump and they don't charge fees. There's a lot of innovative things going on right now that help the capital raise go faster if you're trying to appeal to the ultra wealthy, and then have a different share class and set of terms perhaps for the non-ultra wealthy that you raise capital from.
So it goes back to what you said before, like hit singles and build the relationships, because, from the real estate perspective, you can tie up a property, maybe the period's only 60 days. You have to have the relationships in place right away, so I guess, so you can go to these guys.
Right. If you're not playing a long-term game, you might as well not be in the family office space at all. Like if you're looking to retire in the next 9 months, or all you care about is how much income you make from your business in the next 6 to 9 months, then you should just go to people that are easier to close. And family offices will smell it out in a minute. If all you care about is how stressed out you are on your deal closing in 30 days and you don't care about getting to know them or adding value first or listening to them or anything of that nature, then they'll want nothing to do with you, because they don't live in a stressed out bubble of people pressuring them to do things and people telling them what their priorities are. Families do want to know if a deal is under a timeline, but there's a way to do that with class and be politely persistent versus being obnoxious or annoying or rude or just being in a totally different time warp where you follow up 4 times in a week and it feels like 4 times in an hour to a busy family office professional.
Let's talk about the trust curves. I think that's probably a good segue into that. Let's talk about the trust curves.
Yeah, sure. So, everyone starts with friends and family when raising capital because they're all the way up the trust curve on who you are already. But a lot of people who are raising capital for a specific area, like let's say it's medical office buildings, I've found don't naturally go and say, okay, well, let's only raise capital from dentists who own their own practices, from surgeons, for people who are part of medical associations or work in healthcare, who have had exits in healthcare, et cetera. And building up niche lists and figuring out what niche investor demographic you're going to appeal to is so important, because that's how you gain their trust and get a foot in the door. Is because they say, oh, okay, well, this deal is worth looking at because I can see why medical parks and plazas are in such high demand. Or, oh, okay, well, I understand the data center investment play because I've had an exit in fintech or in something related to the internet, which, or video or streaming or the cloud or something. There's lots of people having exits every month in that space. So going to that group would be going to people already up the trust curve on the industry. And I just think that the more you can have 80% of your time going at one of those 3 trust curves as it's related to your deal, the more effective you'll be. But then if you also just see that regardless of the specific deals in front of you, which hopefully are all very common or similar in type because of your focus, you're really becoming an expert and positioned as an expert on them, then hopefully you're really honing in on a very specific investor type, and you go beyond just the 3 trust curves and go into the brain of that investor and what are their common headaches and common pain points. And when you can get inside of their head and know where they've typically maybe been burned, what they're annoyed about in terms of structure and fees in the space, where they're frustrated, what types of deals they never get to see but they'd like to, then you can really talk through that lens and appeal to them on a whole nother level with everything that you do. And that's kind of an evolution that has to come over time just by listening carefully and being focused not only with your strategy, but on what type of investor you should be going to, because you are looking at it through the 3 trust curves.
So what about then when you actually go to meet these investors? I mean, what types of materials, what are you prepared to make yourself more credible?
Yeah, great question. The one-liner is most important. You got to have that one sentence down on why you matter to start out the meeting, to get the meeting, to confirm the meeting, et cetera. On that front page of your pitch deck, there should be that one-liner. Same with your one-pager. You should make sure you have a one-pager. A lot of people have these overly long pitch decks, 40-page, 50 pages instead of 15 or 20 pages, which would probably be more effective. But then worse than that, they don't have it boiled down to one page. And the most sophisticated investors, they don't have time to look through your 40-page pitch deck, which you might take till page 4 to actually figure out what the heck you're doing. They need to see one pager so that you have a key visual on how you're adding value to the industry, your one-liner at the top, pictures of your team, your expertise, your track records. They could look at it while going down an elevator or boarding an airplane and say yes, no to their assistant on setting up a call with you. That's critical when you go into a meeting as well, because my experience is a lot of these guys move 1,000 miles per hour. They're not going to stay on the phone for 45 minutes while you go through a pitch deck. When you go meet in person, usually it's more casual of a conversation, and you might have your pitch deck there to reference to, but they want to hear your story, hear what you're focused on, and hear what's most important. And they're very sensitive to wasting their time. So just assume a 15 or 20 minute meeting or 30 minutes at max, and not assume to get an hour of their time. So I think those are some of the most important things when you meet in person. But also, being prepared when you go in there and just realizing that so many people, we have 6,000 people a year coming through the Family Office Club events. And I can't tell you how many people come up and they say, oh, I've got 12 years experience, or I have 27 years experience in commercial real estate, et cetera. And most of them have a great depth of experience. And then they email you from a Yahoo email address, or they show you a pitch deck that looks like it was put together from a high school student who nowadays would probably look better if a high school student did it, but like a 1990s high school student.
Well, we'll go with the AOL guy, right? Those are the guys we want to hone in on.
Yeah. didn't know that company still existed. So the point is, Steve Jobs said that the packaging of Apple would impute value upon the device because it's so beautiful and well designed and packaged. Well, the opposite is true for almost everyone listening to this. If you look at your materials, they're probably hurting your capital raise because they just look very poor quality compared to, they don't do you justice for the level of expertise that you truly have. So just keep that in mind for people raising capital. And if you just spend 0.1% of what you're raising capital on getting your materials right, I think it'd make all the difference. You're raising 20 million, maybe spend 20,000 having it actually look professional, and you can raise 20 million and 20,000 and it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah. And I think part of that, you might want to speak on it too, is unrealistic expectations. Because if I had a nickel for every pro forma that was submitted to me with 3.5% plus annual rent bumps, for example, or increases when you know that's not realistic, is those are the types of things that immediately people turn a page and say, no, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that family offices are looking for high integrity. So they're looking for people who over deliver and under promise. That's a sign of trust. It's a sign of honesty. They're scientifically proven that we trust others more when others will admit that things aren't perfect, that they're not perfect, that things might not go perfectly because they never do. And we have an internal development agency called pitchdex.com. And we have a client, Dan Corey, who is just a very conservative commercial real estate underwriter type. He's underwritten maybe $8 billion in capital. And he, the thing that's appealing about him is he's not like a really fast moving, fast talking New York whiz bang, I'm going to double your money type guy. He's very conservative. He says no to almost everything he sees. He's very calm and thorough. And we'll look at most stuff and just say, nope, it's way too expensive, or good for them if they can sell to that price, but it's not going to be a smart investment. And I think family offices want that type. There's no way that you are under promising and over delivering when your, estimates on what you're going to do are just sky high across the board. Then you're basically saying, well, this is the absolute best, and I'm going to tell you that's what we're going to do. When, the market might not keep going up forever and ever, as it seems to be, right now. And I see this even more with private equity companies and operating businesses. If anyone's listening to this and they're of that type, where, they're doing 1 million, 2 million, 2.5 million, and they think that after getting an investment, they're going to go up to 40 million a year. I just saw one of those yesterday. And you just instantly just want to take back the time that they just stole from your life by even reading their pitch deck, because it's so ridiculous and it just smells like amateurism.
Yeah. Light switch off. It's like, it's the same thing we just said with the retail centers. You'd see, well, how are you going to increase the value? Well, I'm going to increase the rent by 3.5% or 4.5% or whatever. It's okay. You've got 2 institutional tenants in there with leases. I don't get how you're going to do that. Well, we'll figure out a way to make that happen because it's, whatever. You're like, okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. So the light switch turns off, and that's the end of that conversation.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to integrity, they want to see integration between what did you do before, what are you doing now? And that's why I think starting small and just getting, say, 5 deals done that are small but are in aggregate equal to $20 million, you might get those 5 deals done faster than if you just tried to raise $20 million and you're trying to go from 0 miles per hour to 60. It's better to get up to 10 miles per hour first, and then get to 15 and then 25 and then, ease it up over time. Is just more realistic.
Richard, you mentioned pitchdex.com. It sounds like something that may be of interest to syndicators and investors, and maybe help them make a deal. Can you go into a little bit of detail on that?
Yeah, so they're putting a deal together, and it sounds like there's somebody who might be able to help with that deal, right?
Right. Yeah. So what we've done is created a internal marketing agency for anyone in investor relations or raising capital, or anyone who runs a real estate investment firm, where essentially we've just seen that people are out there paying $5,000 for a logo, or $10,000 for a pitch deck, or one just spent $30,000 on a website before we started talking to them. And they're made to look pretty. They're made to look nice. It's better than it looking horrible, but it's not optimized at all for investor relations. Also, we've found that most people who can do a website for you or a logo, they're not the same people who can do a pitch deck or a one-pager. They might not even know that you need a one-pager. And so what we do is bundle it all in one, and we do a pitch deck, a one-pager, a logo, a one-liner. We can do a whiteboard explainer video, social media setup, etc., with one team. So we've got a 4-person team and a process that we move through to get it done. But most importantly, besides a one-stop shop, is we don't just make it look pretty. We make sure that you don't say the same thing all of your competitors are saying. We make sure you aren't missing critical components, that you aren't using confusing terminology, and that you're doing things and having a brand that really positions you to attract your targeted investor. We make sure that you actually have a targeted investor, that you know why you're different than your competition. And so there's some kind of consulting kind of mixed in with getting those materials done, because a lot of people, they can't answer the questions that we're asking them about their own business, about what investors are targeting and why, about what makes them different, about their track record, et cetera. And to give you a really clear example, we had someone recently who was raising capital from high net worth and family offices, and they were using the term multifamily, but they admitted that a good percentage of their high net worth investors don't know what multifamily means. They know what apartment buildings mean. So they changed their marketing so that their brand name and their one-liner used the words apartment building instead of multifamily. A different client who happened to also be in real estate was calling themselves a boutique private equity firm in New York and Florida. And I told them, like, well, I know about 800 firms like that, so I have no idea what you do or why to work with you. And I think that what we moved to was helping explain that they really wanted to focus on one commercial real estate asset class in one of those states, and not to say they're a private equity firm, say that you're doing, that type of commercial real estate investing. So those are some quick examples. And I want to talk about in a second the 4 levels of investment branding that everybody should be thinking about. But I just want to stop there to make sure you didn't have any questions or that anything I said.
No, I'm good. It's. I mean, we see it too. I mean, I see pitch decks constantly, and looks like, as you say, it's put together by. I mean, I don't want to say high school student, because a high school student usually tends to be pretty adept at the computer. But I mean, they could have put it together on it's from the 50-plus-year-old dude, because it looks like it was done on an abacus and a typewriter. And so
yeah, exactly. The high school student analogy doesn't really work anymore, since they are so fluent in using the computers. It did 10 years ago, maybe, or 15. But so I think one thing I've realized is that you could have a horrible brand and raise a lot of capital, right? You might have amazing deal flow, amazing track record, amazing relationships and Rolodex, great strategy, and you might raise hundreds of millions. And there's billion-dollar-plus firms with horrible brand names, right? But if you're listening to this, you're probably frustrated with raising capital. It's probably hard to find the next investor. It seems like a lot of work. It seems inefficient. That's the life that most people raising capital live. And so you need every advantage out there working for you. So if something could cost you nothing but give you an advantage every time you try to set up a meeting to raise capital, and every time you go to a meeting, and every time you email someone, why wouldn't you have that for $0, right? It's like, it doesn't make any sense to ignore this concept that there's really 4 levels of branding you can have. Level 1 branding is just god-awful branding that repels people. Like, the brand literally insults people, confuses them, or makes them think you are something bad. This is not common, but some people just do have awful brands, or it just looks so awful you don't want anything to do with them, but it literally is hurting you. Level 2 branding is just neutral. It's ABC Capital, or it's some Greek god's name that no one knows what it means unless they look it up, and no one ever takes the time to look it up. So it might as well be a Chinese name that no one understands. Those 2 types of names are very common, and it's neutral. Doesn't hurt you, doesn't help you. It's just brainless, like everyone else slapping a name out there like Wilson Capital. Unless someone's known you for a decade and they'd invest, even if you did put some Chinese characters in front of it, it's not helping you that you say Wilson Capital, because no one knows what Wilson means or stands for unless they already know you. So the level 3 branding is some sort of brand that is slightly descriptive about what you do. Maybe it gives them a hint at what industry you're in. So it at least gives them a hint that maybe they're coming down a trail to something they're looking for. Some firms have this. I think maybe 25% of firms that come into our events that we survey have a brand like this. Most people have a level 2 brand that doesn't hurt or help them, but this is a level 3 brand that has some hint of what they do. And then usually only 5 to 7% of those out there have a level 4 brand, which is really positioned to attract a very specific investor set, or tell someone exactly what type of asset they're buying, and ideally even tells them why they should invest with you. So the brand name, hopefully, is made so that when you read it, you already want to take a meeting with them. You know what they do and see the benefit of working with them. And if not in the brand name, then the one-liner and the brand name combined should for sure do those two things. Even if you have a horrible brand name, you combine it with a one-liner and it should do those things. Tell you exactly what you're investing in and why they should care that you exist on planet Earth. And that's the difference between reading a brand name XYZ Capital versus, and not having a one-liner, versus having a name called, Houston Self-Storage Investment Group or Investment Club. And then the one-liner drives home the unique JV or co-GP equity structure that you use to put together your, 17 self-storage deals to date in Houston. There's a night and day difference.
So I was going to ask you for an example, and you gave that. And while you've been talking, I've been thinking, like, what is an example of like a brand that repels? I was thinking of like Harry Investments or something. I mean, what is it that would like? I mean, what? I guess maybe you can't even say on the air, but I mean,
right. I mean, we have had one where the logo was just so god awful. It just looked very unprofessional. It was like a green, like clip art logo. So it just looks careless. Like, if you're not going to invest $200 in your own brand name, why should I invest 2 minutes of my time type feeling? Another one would be a lot of investors don't want to go close to, like a decade ago, REOs being syndicated during the downturn. There's brokers all over the place syndicating those. So people had a bad taste in their mouth, or film industry investing has a bad reputation, et cetera. So sometimes having a brand name that confuses you with an industry no one wants anything to do with could be something. There'd be an example of repelling a potential client away. And then another example on the other side, just because I think whenever someone gives advice, you just have to make sure they're not just trying to sell you something but not really acting on it themselves, is we recently moved away from a broker-dealer structure to having a registered investment advisory structure around the work we do with families. So we took a lot of time to be thoughtful about the name we should use for it, and we chose Centimillionaire Advisors because we just see that there's very few groups on planet Earth catering to the needs of people that are worth $100 million plus. And so that is the focus of our group, and we're focused on those types of needs, and having a name where once you read it, you say, oh, it's a group that only advises people like me. Never heard about that before. It could make them lean forward. So I think that it's worth putting some thought into, and it doesn't cost any money to do so. Of course, anyone who engages with pitchdex.com, we help them through that process. But really, we're here for the design aspects or the heavy lifting of creating a whole bunch of materials. This branding exercise could be done by anybody just by listening to this.
Awesome.
So if people want to learn more about the services that you offer and the things that you do, how can they
also
reach you?
The events,
and the events.
I mean, people might want to start dipping their toe in the water and walk around a couple of these events that Richard's putting on to see if this is something that's for them and if it's a good fit.
Sure. Yeah. So there's 3 quick places I can get across in about 30 seconds here. So the first place is that if you want a quick 80-page book on how to raise capital, after 12 years of running this investor community, I've put one together at capitalraising.com. It's free to download. If you like paperback books, way better. You could download it and then find it on Amazon. If you want to check that out, all of these books I'm about to talk about are also on Amazon, but they're free on these websites. So the first one's capitalraising.com. The second one, our latest book, is on the headaches of $100 million plus families. There might be a couple of you listening to this podcast now that are at 30, 50 million or way over 100. And I've identified 6 headaches that almost all of my $100 million plus clients have, and provided remedies and resources and tools to help solve those. And you can get that book at centamillionaires.com. And then the last place would be anyone new to the family office space, anyone who wants to see our event schedule, how charter membership in the Family Office Club works, or to download our free book on family offices, could go to familyoffices.com.
Terrific. Stephen, great conversation. Is there anything else you want to ask before we let Richard go?
No, Richard, we look forward to seeing you at one of your shows, and we'll check in with you sometime in the future to see how things have changed. But thank you for being with us today.
Awesome. Yeah, always happy to be on here. And I do hope to see you at least one event later this year. That'd be great.
Awesome, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was Richard Wilson back with us again to give us more insight on the family office market. Stephen, what were your thoughts about our chat with Richard?
Well, the types of investors that he deals with are not like the normal investors. They're not there to be entertained. You have to be succinct. You have to know what you're doing. And it's an education for us also to listen to. I mean, Eric, you always preach, less is more. I mean, that's really what he's saying. Have a one-liner, have a one-pager, and communicate your message briefly and do it in a classy manner. Otherwise, you're wasting everyone's time.
And do your research. His pitchdex.com sounds interesting because I have wasted enough time on looking at people's pitches to know that there's people that need help out there putting their presentations together. But many times, we just talking about doing homework, people will call and they'll say, hey, I want to try to pitch you, Starbucks in your plaza. Okay. Well, we've got a Dunkin' Donut in the plaza. Anybody who knows anything about doing business with Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks knows that Dunkin's not going to allow Starbucks in that plaza. So why are you calling to waste my time? But you get these types of conversations with people, and they haven't done their basic homework to look at your property. And so it aggravates you because they've wasted your time. They've wasted their time. That person gets put on a do not disturb list when they call again.
Well, it's worse if they call, it's one thing. It's when you have an appointment and you sit down for an hour and that hour is just lost.
And you can't get out of the meeting with them. So this is the bottom line. And I think that to me was one of the key points that pulled through on Richard's conversation is, do your homework. Don't be afraid of family offices. If you're a professional, if you're a syndicator and you've done 3 or 4 deals and they've returned for the investors, there's going to be people wanting to do business with you. So don't be afraid, but just do your homework and make sure you're speaking to the right group. You're conveying the right message, and you're making good use of your time and the investor's time. And those are the types of individuals putting together syndications that build lifelong relationships. And that's what everybody wants. Nobody wants to go out and have to ask people for money. You want folks that are on your team, that when you have a deal, you can take it to somebody and get it executed, and you get to work on the things that you're good at, blocking and tackling, acquisition, property management, disposition, leasing properties, whatever it might be that you're good at. That's what you're able to focus on, because people really don't want to be out raising funds. That's not something that people really want to do as a profession. So anyway, good stuff. Stephen, Richard, back on the show again. But you want to hear Richard from the past, or you want to hear other great speakers? Where can they find that information?
There's only one place. It's www.investfloridashow.com. Go to the website, but even better yet, download the app on your Android or Apple device and listen while you're mobile.
Awesome. Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Stephen Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida Show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida Show.